Hey, Ed here. Welcome to Lessons from My Mentors. This one is from 2002 and 4. So I had a mentor that was outside of healthcare, which I recommend. I think you should have a diversity of mentors. Ed Casputis. I should look him up next time in Cleveland. So he was like a state senator, a lawyer, an investor, and we had him as a speaker one time. So I was president of the North Ohio Hymns chapter, and someone must have connected me to him. I can't remember how I discovered him, but we had him as a speaker, and I was like floored. I was like so impressed with him. And so I asked him, probably a week or two later, like, would you have lunch with me? And so we went out and then just kind of got tighter with him. And then I asked him to be my formal mentor, which he was actually for a couple of years. And he was great. And he took me with him places. And I remember one time we went down, drove all the way down to Columbus together and attended a dinner where he was a speaker. And so we had a lot of FaceTime together, which was really, really cool. But one thing he would taught me is I was faced with a difficult challenge. So I was that new CIO, if you recall the story, at university hospitals, and we were doing a big EHR implementation. Now remember, this is early days. Like today, you could call any of your peers now if you're a CIO in healthcare, and someone's been there, done that many times. But this was early 2000s, and what had happened, there was a very high profile failure of an EHR implementation at Cedars-Sinai in LA. And that's where our CEO came from. So he was COO, so he watched all that unfold, became CEO at university hospitals. So he's pretty paranoid. And here he's got this new kid as the CIO. So he was like, Ed, what are you going to do? What are you going to do, to manage this project? Because again, there was no one to go to. There was no conference to go to. There's no peers really to go to that have done much with this sort of transformation back in the early 2000s. So I have this dynamic going on. The other dynamic going on is that we have a board, and I always thought about having a technology subcommittee to the board, right? You've got a finance committee, you got an HR committee typically, a quality committee. Those are pretty much the three standards. And then depending on the organization, they might have one or two others. Well, I was like, whoa, we're starting to invest heavily in technology. We should have a technology subcommittee of the board. So thinking all through this and talking with Ed Casputis. And so the plan we came up with, and you could still do this today, and I highly recommend it. So again, couldn't really go to peers. So what I did was I looked at the board, right? Most boards have CEOs of some pretty impressive companies, and we did. And there were these huge manufacturing companies. I'm talking 30, $40 billion manufacturing companies. There was Sherwin-Williams, like paint company. There was Parker Hannifin, a major production company. There was a chemical company located there, and then there was, and I'm just spacing the name of it, but a medical device manufacturer there. And so what I did, so they were all part of our board, right? The CEOs. So what I did is I found out who the CIOs were, and then I sent them a message. I said, look, I've got this big transformative project on the horizon. I'm pretty green here. I've never had a big major, project like this. I bet you have, and I would love to meet you and get together with you and have dinner. And so that's what we did. I still remember the location was, for those familiar with Cleveland, because the restaurant's still there, called Lockkeepers. They have this private room, and all of them showed up. There was like 5 CIOs, and I was in awe because again, I'm this young kid, and these are all tenured CIOs of some pretty big firms, and I was just like, in awe that they showed up. And then I asked them question after question, what do you do? What do you do? And looking back, probably silly questions, but at the time, very important questions for me. And for those of you who aren't so tenured yet in your career. So they just fed me, and I just took copious notes, and I came up with this thing. And then I went to the CEO. So he's like, Ed, what's your mitigation strategy? You've never done anything. We've never done anything. Look at where I came from. What are we going to do? And I said, well, what I did is I got together a group of my peers that also have their bosses on the board of directors. And he was like, that's brilliant. And I remember telling him, iron sharpens iron, which is from the scripture, one of my favorite portions of scripture. And he was like, whoa, yeah, I like that. What does that mean? and I got to share with them a little bit about that particular scripture and what it meant in terms of, having other people around you and making you better and making one another better. And this was just a great example of that. So sure enough, they fed me. I took copious notes. And then when we embarked on this very aggressive project, I just followed all of those different principles and we had huge success. And I attribute some of that success to the feeding I got from those other CIOs who are members of the board. Now that set up us eventually getting a subcommittee to the board, right? So you can see how I worked it both ways. And so sure enough, today there is a subcommittee on the board, and it got right when I left. We constituted that subcommittee for the board. So it worked in every way. It would help me, help the organization, and help future CIOs by having a technology subcommittee. So that's really the lesson is when you need help, go out and ask people and they'll help you. And don't always go just to your healthcare peers, which is important and a good thing to do. But a lot of times you'll get more from people outside of healthcare than you will inside. So it's good to have a combination. And then if you're looking to make a subcommittee to your board, if you don't have one already, so I highly suggest you do it, think about just reaching out to the companies that are representative on your board and start there. And then you might find interest in getting those particular board members on board with this whole concept. That's it. Lessons from my mentors. Great chatting. Talk to you next time.